Hi, it's Constant Angler. I just want to talk to you today about some common mistakes that newcomers to wrasse fishing or lure fishing for wrasse make. Yes, wrasse fishing can be overcomplicated, but if you don't make these mistakes, you're more likely to catch fish, not lose so much gear, and return again for another go. And my aim is to get you to catch a Ballan Wrasse. So we're talking Ballan Wrasse here. We're not talking, cork wings and things like that. That's LOF, light rock fishing. You're fishing for Ballan Wrasse from, say, you're targeting fish from, say, 1.5 pounds up to 5, or even bigger if you're lucky to live in places that have bigger. Commonly, most wrasse that I fish for are between sort of 2 and 4 pound, and as they get bigger, obviously the numbers drop. So we need good gear. So the first mistake, I've got a little list you'll see me look at, is not using heavy enough gear. You will be shocked at the power of a wrasse that you catch at short range or long range and how hard they fight. They immediately try to get down into that rough stuff and give no quarter. You can't afford to give any quarter. So I'll give you an extra tip. Set your drag tight. Don't have a very loose drag because they'll just get in there and you snag. So first tip, not heavy enough gear. So what are we talking about setup wise? Well, this is my bait casting setup, my latest, so I'm always changing my gear. But this rod is rated at 7 to 31 grams, and on it I've got 20 pound braid, and it's not the finest of braids. I want a bit thicker, so we're looking at sort of 0.18 to say 0.22 diameter braid, something like that. And then I've got a 15 pound fluorocarbon leather attached to that. Now that's as low as I would go. I do go up to 25. I've even gone to 30 if I'm in the really rough stuff. So there's your first mistake. The other setup I got, a spinning rod setup, the one I'm currently using, I do switch around a bit, I must admit, is a let's have a look at the rating on this rod here. 5 to 30 gram rod. Now this is the Major Craft Cross Stage, and I've got a 4,000 size spinning reel on there. A 3,000 will do it, but again I've got 20 pound braid. This is cheap casking super power braid. I love the stuff for wrasse fishing. I haven't got a leather on that at the minute, but I would have the same strength leathers, so something between 15 and 25 pound. You're fishing in really rough ground, so you can't be messing around. Now these rods in length, that's whatever, that's a personal preference, whatever you prefer, but I would say anything from 7 foot up to even 9.5 foot I've used if I'm casting at long range. Whatever you need to get the bait and lure, sorry, your lure and your rig as far as the wrasse are. So yeah, so you want beefy gear. You really need to get some, grip on a fish and stop it and win that fight. So that would be the first mistake that people make. If we develop that a little bit more, we can bring in hooks to this, because they're a very important factor. Now, I'll mention nets in a minute because that's another mistake that people make. If I show you these two patterns I have here, so I have Vivara Wrasse, Grand, Master, Offset, Wide Gape, ultra heavy wire hooks. These are in 1.0, so hopefully this is going to focus. Now, if you're struggling to get a net, can't afford one to start off with, but you want to have a go, then these are the ones you want. These are not going to bend out on you. Now, what a lot of people do, you can use this kind of thing, finer wire hooks. So this is a decoy pattern. They use this kind of hook. That's the sort of hook they use for perch fishing. Now, wrasse are absolute animals, and like I already said, they'll bury themselves in that rough ground, and they will bend hooks like this out. Now, normally they won't bend them themselves. It's when you try and lift them out because you haven't got a net that they will bend those finer wires out. Now, you want a hook as finer wire as you can get away with, because it doesn't spoil the action of your lure as much as the heavier gauge. The heavier the gauge, the heavier the wire, the more it weighs, and the more that can affect your action. But you have to finesse things with wrasse, but we're not finessing things that much. We're fishing in the rough stuff. We want to pull them, get them out. So my advice would be, and I buy these from Veal's mail order, is to get some of these. They do an orange hook as well, which is heavy wire but not as heavy as this, and I'd recommend that one as well. But you can use your perch hooks if you've got a net, but you may get the odd hook bent out. You hook a 4 pound £3 plus fish at close quarters, and it may well do that. So yeah, go heavy on the gauge, go heavier on your gear. I would start off, I wouldn't use anything less than 21 grams, rod rated at 21 grams, so that's its upper end of its range. And I do at times use up to 35 grams. You could use a 40-gram rod as long as there's enough sensitivity in the tip of the rod. So that's the first mistake. Second mistake, well, not using the right rig. So if we get out of this rod again, and I'll show you. I've done a video on it if you want to look at it, done a couple of videos on it. But this rig is called the Texas rig. Now it's a weedless presentation, so if I drop that a minute, show you the rig. So I've got my fluorocarbon leather there. If I can just try and, if you just have a look at it like that for the moment. I've got a Texas weight, that's a lead weight. You can use tungsten if you can afford it, but you're going to lose gear whatever you do, so I use lead. I've then got a metal bead. I like the sound of metal on the weight, and that sound attracts the fish. You could use glass beads or plastic beads. Glass beads are what are standardly recommended. Then you've got your EWG hook, what I've just showed you, and your Texas rigging. So the whole thing is a Texas rig, but you're Texas rigging the bait on here as well. And what you're doing is exposing the hook, so you're pulling a bit of plastic over towards the hook eye and dropping it over the point of the rig to make it weedless. It's difficult for me to show you that right here, and I've lost my list as well. So yeah, I would recommend you use a Texas rig. So look on YouTube, there's plenty of videos on them. Look at my own channel, you will find them. I've done one specifically on Texas rig fishing for wrasse. Don't overcomplicate things to start off with. That rigging it like that will allow you to throw your baits in the rough stuff and catch wrasse. Let's pop this one back a minute. Grab my list. Knocking the chair over. So we've done heavy gear and we've done the right rig. So another big mistake, huge mistake I see a lot of anglers use, and I've spoken to anglers, they've asked me and they've said, why am I missing all these bites? Well, the reason you're missing bites is generally because you're striking too early. So a golden rule is to not strike into the fish until either your rod tip is going over or you see your line straightening up and pulling away. The minute you see either of those, then strike. Generally, wrasse bites, so this is a big tip here, will be a solid stun, and you'll go, ooh, blimey. It is quite shocking, especially if you haven't experienced it before. And then what they're doing is they're stunning the lure, or they'd be stunning a fish or something like that in this instance, wouldn't they? And then they're looking at it, and then they're coming back to grab it and take it away. So don't hit that initial stun unless the rod keeps going over. Wait a few seconds. I pretty much guarantee you, in no time at all, they'll come back, grab it, the rod tip will go over, and then set your hook and give no quarter. Remember, that drag's got to be tight. Doesn't have to be totally tight, but only give at the most extreme pressure, let's say. Have a look at my videos, you'll see me set my drag up. So yeah, the bite, get the bite right. Don't bang as soon as you feel something, because unless that rod tip's going over, they haven't got it out in their mouths and you're not going to hook them. That will get you a lot more fish. I would say 95% of the time, fish stun a bait first, a few seconds, come back, take it, and you're in. But don't dither. Once that rod starts going and that line starts pulling up tight, hook, because they'll be in that rough stuff before you know it. So that's the third mistake. If you wonder what the lure I had there was, it's a stabby shad from Craft. I got these from the excellent Chesil Bait and Tackle up near Chesil Beach, up in Portland, isn't it? Weymouth, sorry. So yeah, great lures, bass and wrasse. So what was my fourth mistake here? Right, so my fourth mistake was not having a long-handled net. Now, I've done a video on my channel and you'll see me using it all the time. It's up in the car in a minute. I should have got it, to be honest, shouldn't I? I've got a Daiwa Rockfish ISO landing net. They're not cheap. Just the handle is about £80, and then you're going to pay about £25 for the net head, which is an HTO collapsible large landing net head. The handle itself will extend to almost 6 meters. I think it's 5.9 meters. Now, when you're up on the rocks, there's a couple of reasons you need that long handle net, because you might be quite a way up above the rocks, so you need to get a net that's going to go down. Because you imagine trying to hand line or lift by the rod tip, you're going to snap your rod tips. If you're doing that, sooner or later it's going to happen. a fish, a heavy fish, say you've hooked a 3 pound wrasse or 4 pound wrasse, even a 2 pound wrasse, your fine wire hooks are going to pull out. The fish might shake off. It's not going to do the fish any good. And secondly, which is a major factor here, an important factor that people don't realise, is you've got to think about your own safety. You don't want to be scrambling down to the edge of the water to try and land these fish, because you can get freak waves. You might fall in. You certainly don't want to be up at a great height fishing off a ledge for fish down below you, several meters below you. You want to be able to land them with a net. And this net compacts to this sort of length, you know, so you can still, I've got it in the boot of the car, you can still stick it in the boot of the car. It's not heavy, but it's strong. There are other models, but that's the one I use, and I see a lot of other people using as well now. So get yourself a long handled net. If you get one with a collapsible head, the one I've mentioned, even better. Seems to last long. Just rinse it off after each trip. Put a bit of oil or something on the mechanism of the collapsible landing net head, and it will last you a long time. Don't do like I've done, leave it behind, because it's an expensive thing to do. So the next mistake that people make, well, it's not learning the FG knot. You can use a uni knot, and you'll get away with that a lot of the time, and you'll lose a decent amount of gear, quite a decent amount of gear, so it can get expensive. Let's say that. But if you learn the FG knot, and if I can, I'm not going to find it there now, you won't be able to see it anyway. But if you learn the FG knot, and you learn the simple basic FG knot, so I'm not talking the risotto finish here, I do a series of overhand knots to secure it in place. I just go over and under for one, and the opposite for the next one I do about 6. I have done a video, so you can check that out. That knot is fantastic. You're pulling for breaks because you'll snag. The weight's generally a thing that gets snagged in little crevices. You imagine the points of the deck this weight, just shoving into a crevice, something like that. There are other rigs that can help with that, but stick with the Texas rig to start off with. You've got to pull for a break sometimes, and you just have to do it. And very often with the FG knot, it's going to allow you to pull harder, so pull your gear through, free even, more often. What it'll also do though is, you don't want to be continually retying leathers, and if you tie it properly, it isn't that hard. You just need to take time to practice. Spend an hour or two and you'll get it. Any problems, just ask your questions. The rig will snap at the hook end, so yeah, you'll lose your weight, your bead, your hook, and maybe your lure, but you still got a long leather there, so you can just check it, tie on a new rig, takes 2 seconds, put on a lure, and away you go again. Whereas if you're having to try leathers continuously because you're using a uni knot or any other knot, there's all bright knots, there's all sorts of knots you can use, but the FG knot goes through the rod rings better, so it allows you to cast better, and when it comes back through, it doesn't snag as much as some of the other knots I talked about. So try and learn the FG knot. If you're struggling with that, then use the uni knot, but put extra wraps in the braid side of it. So if you're using say 5-6 wraps in the fluorocarbon, do 8 to 10 in the braid, because the braid tends to slip a bit more and bend these things right down. That will get you going. It's simple, will get you wrasse fishing, but be prepared to lose gear. You will lose gear anyway. You'll lose more with a uni knot than you will with an FG knot. So learn the FG knot if you can. What's next on the list? Right, oh, this is a biggie. I see your aim is to present your lure along the bottom or just above it, and you want to present it at a speed the fish can have a look at it and then decide they're going to have it. So if you're moving it too quickly, so the mistake that people make is moving too fast, and I'll add fishing too high in the water. You don't want huge big lifts, because the lure's going to go right up several feet and down. You want to try and what they call maintain bottom contact. So you want to try and keep it on the bottom, or say within a foot of the bottom or so, unless you've got weed which is several feet high, and then of course you can put bigger lifts in, and but there are other rigs more suitable for that. So if you're not catching, fish slower, and if you're still not catching, fish slower again, especially in the winter when it's colder, because the fish don't want to move so much. And you'll see me on my videos using lures, stick bait lures called senkos. They look like worms, and generally they're floating. And what they'll do is sit there and I'll rattle them in place so they don't move much, but then I'm casting around to features I can see that I know fish are sitting in. So I'm not fishing fast at all. I'm trying not to really move the weight. I'm just trying to get the lure to flutter or wangle in their faces so they have a go in the winter. But it applies to most times of the year. What you might do, I don't know what you do when you're perch fishing, but you know, I'm just assuming you might, I guess a lot of it's done in the winter, so you're fishing slow anyway, aren't you? But a lot of newbies to say lure fishing and wrasse fishing will move that bait too far and too far off the bottom. What I generally do is I'll go rattle, 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 and I'm winding in the slack, and I'll pause for, I don't know, on average, say 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds. In the winter, I'll double that or more. And then I hop it, or whatever you want to do, and pause again. But also keep in contact with that lure. So wind your slack in slowly, watch your line, and then wait for that bite, and don't strike too early. So they're the common ones. Can I think of anything else? Is there anything I missed here? There's bound to be something I missed. Don't fish in areas and don't hold fish. That's one. They might look great, but if you're doing all those things I've said, you're using good lures, so I'd recommend you get some worm hooks, lures, so Senkos. Get some of those in about between 3 and 5 inches. That's the size baits you want to use. Get yourself some crawl baits, you know, the ones you use for your perch fishing. Get yourself some shads like the stabby shad. How long is this? This is slim and it's 4 inches. I like slim lures, fatter lures. If I show you, so we're into extra tips here now, aren't we? If I show you this one, when a wrasse hits, stuns, bites a bait, or any fish does, on a weedless presentation, they'll bite down and the bait will sink like that, and it exposes the hook point. So it will slide down and expose the hook point. If you've got a fatter bait, there's less of that that's going to show when it does that, so there's less chance of you hooking up. So nice slim baits are good, whether they're slim that way or definitely that way. That's a nice size bait. That's a cracking bait. It's almost too good a lure to use for wrasse, to be honest. I'll probably use them for bass. So you've got shads, you've got crawls, you've got Senkos, and get yourself some other creature baits. If you look at it and you think, oh, that looks good, doesn't it? You know, there's lots of feelers and things like that. Maybe it's got a curly tail on it, that kind of thing. And generally it will catch you wrasse. It's how you fish it. So if I'm fishing, once again, a shad, I need to get that tail to move. So I need to move it at a certain speed, and this weight needs to be heavy enough that on the fall it will get that tail moving, vibrating, or when I pull it, it will do the same. If you're not getting the appendages of the lure, so whether they're a tail, a claw on a crawl bait, or a curly tail worm, or just an ordinary stick bait to move and impart some action into it, it's not going to be attracted to the fish. There's fantastic baits on the market. If you go back, you'll see videos I've done with some weird and wonderful creature baits, and I've got more to use this year. So you think about how you're going to impart that action. You don't want to be a lure that you have to move so fast to impart an action into it that the fish aren't even going to see it, you know. So keep to these basics. So let's go over them again. Let's get my bit of paper so I don't forget. So use heavy enough gear, use the correct rig, use the Texas rig to start off with. You're new to this, use the best rig. That is the best rig. Don't strike the bite too soon, but once the rod tip or the line tighten up, go for it and don't give any quarter. Use a long handled net if you can. You can get various lengths, it's up to you. If you can't afford a 6 meter one like I've got, get one shorter, they're a bit cheaper. Learn the FG knot as soon as you possibly can, and don't fish too fast. Those things there, they will put you in good stead to catch a beautiful, big, bold, biting Ballan Wrasse. So all the best. Send me the pictures, let me know how you got on. Any problems, just comment on the video, or I have a Facebook page of the same name, The Constant Angler. Ask me your questions and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Thanks again. Thanks for supporting. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, all those things. They all help the channel, they help the algorithm, and build a community. Thanks, The Constant Angler.